Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we are going to be going over speaking part two. So, just a reminder that there's three speaking parts in the IELTS test. And today, we're going to go over part two. If you missed part one, make sure you watch part one first, or at some point, I guess I don't mind whether you watch it last or first or whatever it is. Part two and three are closely related, so I do strongly advise watching this lecture before you watch the next lecture for part three. But let's get into it. Okay, so today you're going to learn the skills needed for speaking task number two, which include what vocabulary you need to use for your answers, how to answer sample questions, and also how to structure your answers properly. So, those are the three biggest things. So, before we get into that, though, what even is task two? Task two is where they're going to ask you to prepare um, some information about a topic and tell it to the examiner. Okay, so they're going to give you a minute or so to prepare what you're going to say, and then you're going to say it. They may also ask you some follow up questions in this section as well. Most of the follow up will come in speaking task three, but there will be possibly some follow up questions about this. So let's talk about how do we want to structure our answers, because usually the questions are questions that technically could be answered in, a word or a sentence or two sentences, but we don't want to just answer with a word or two. We want to answer in full sentences first of all, right? And we also want to make sure that we're including good relevant information. So in general, wherever it makes sense, be sure to include an interesting detail or two that's related to what you're being asked about. Be sure to include the history or just some well-known facts about the history that you know. If it's relevant, also predictions for the future. And then in any case, always state your opinion on the certain topic as well. So it's important to include at least 3 to 4 sentences minimum, I would say, in your answers here. You don't really need to go far past that, but do make sure to not just answer in one sentence, then call it done. That is not going to get you full marks. Also, one thing that's not on here is to make sure that you're using good relevant vocabulary that makes the most sense for the situation. Okay. So having just a strong vocabulary in general will help you for this as well. Okay, so for example, let's say they say, describe your favorite movie. Don't just say, oh, my favorite movie is, I'm trying to think of one. My favorite movie is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and it's a really good action movie, right? Don't just say that. Now, you could start with that, absolutely, right? Because you talked about the genre, you said it was an action movie, and you told them what your favorite movie was. So that would still get you some points, right? That's still a good start, but we don't just want to say that and then be done with it. Okay. And that's a mistake I see so many people make on the IELTS, right? Is to stop speaking too soon, right? You're giving a minute to prepare. Be sure to prepare 3 to 4 sentences and talk about more than just, here's the movie and one thing about it, right? So, for example, I'll do an example with Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I haven't really given much thought to what my favorite movie is. However, one thing I will say too about this is if you're not really sure which one is your favorite movie, you can just describe a movie that you like. That's okay too. Okay, and present it as your favorite movie. Maybe you have multiple favorite movies, just choose one, right? You don't have to talk about all of them necessarily. You can just choose one and stick with that one. So, for example, I could say my favorite movie is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which is an action movie. The movie is about a young boy who's only 11 years old named Harry Potter and who turns out to be a wizard and gets sent off to a wizarding school called Hogwarts. And then what do you think happened after the movie? Well, there actually are other movies. There are the movies 2 to 7 as well for what happens after that movie. But what happens after is he decides to continue going to this school for many more years, and he wants to become an auror in the future, which is a bad wizard catcher, kind of like the wizard version of the police, you could say. And I enjoy this movie because it's, full of action and they have a lot of really interesting characters. I think the character development was really well done in this movie in a way that makes the movie very enjoyable. I also like the idea of having a fantasy world, fantasy worlds that differ a lot from the world that we actually do live in. Those intrigue me because they're different than the lives that the lives that the people in the movie live are different than the lives that we ourselves live, and so that's interesting to me too. Right, so that could be a sample answer that you could say, right? Because we don't just stop with, oh, here's the movie and here's one thing about it. No, we actually go into more detail about what the movie's about, what happens in the movie, what happens after the movie, why is this a movie we enjoy, right? Which gets into what's our opinion, right? What's our opinion of the movie is similar to why we enjoy the movie, that sort of thing. I mean, we could talk about what we don't like about the movie, but I don't think that's necessarily necessary here because they did ask for us to describe our favorite movie. So, most likely, our opinion about our favorite movie is going to be positive. Unless we really don't like any movies and our favorite movie is just the one that happens to be the least bad of all of them, right? We're probably going to say something positive about it. So, that's to be expected. Okay, here they ask, describe one of your favorite places that you like to visit. So here we don't just want to say, for example, one of my favorite places to visit is Turtle Jack's, and that's a restaurant, right? We could start with that. If that's my favorite place to visit, or somewhere I want to talk about here. But we don't just want to end with that. We want to expand that, right? First of all, which place am I talking about, and where is it located? Right? Maybe if it's a restaurant, it could just be a one off restaurant location, or maybe there's multiple locations, right? If we're talking about a chain restaurant like McDonald's, well, there's more than just one McDonald's. Maybe there's a specific McDonald's I usually go to, but there's more than one McDonald's, right? And so we could talk about that too, how McDonald's locations are all over, but the one I usually go to is in this specific city. For example, we could say that if McDonald's was the place I wanted to talk about here, we could talk about any historical facts or interesting facts that we know about this place. So, do you remember the place being opened? Right? Did it open just a few years ago? Is it a local business or a local restaurant or like a local place? Maybe it's a government owned place, right? Maybe it's a museum that the government is involved in. What's the potential future of the place, do you think? And what's an experience you had there, right? So anything like that of, do you think that this place is going to expand? Do you think it's just kind of stay the same as it is now? Do you think they're going to make any changes in the future to keep up with the market? Anything like that? And then an experience you had at this place, right? So this is where we get back to our personal experience or our personal opinion of the place we like to visit. So I will give an example here. One place that I really like to visit is the Water's Edge restaurant. This is just a one off restaurant that's in Minette, Ontario, which is a couple hours north of Toronto, Ontario, which is where I live. It's not a chain, so there's just the one location. This restaurant has been open for about 25 years now, and lots of different people, especially students, work at the restaurant in the summer. They get a lot more business in the summer than other times of year because they're up in cottage country. I think the potential future for this place is that it will become more popular in the future. The cottage country has been expanding since they opened, or since this business has opened. And so I think that in the future, they'll be open all days of the week in the summer. Currently, they're only open some of the days because they don't have enough business. An experience I had at this place is that they made a very special ice cream dish for me that was very yummy and much better than most store bought ice cream or ice cream you can get at other restaurants. And so that's one reason I enjoy this place specifically. So that could be an example answer, right? Because I talked about this place specifically and an experience I had at this place specifically, and make sure to not be so generic, right? We don't want to just be generic of, oh, I went to this restaurant, I had fun with my family. Well, why was it fun? Right? What distinguishes this place specifically that we're talking about from any other restaurant, right? You know, for example, if we just say an experience I had was that the food was delicious, well, that's good, right? That's not a bad thing to say, but at the same time, you could say that about so many different restaurants, right? We want to make sure what was specifically delicious about this food. right? What was special about the food at this restaurant? Or maybe if we were talking about how great the staff were, what did the staff do specifically that was special at this restaurant as opposed to other restaurants? Or if we're talking about a museum and we're saying the museum was very interesting, well, great, but let's go into more detail. Why was the museum interesting? What is a way in which this museum was more interesting than other museums? What's something that sets this museum apart for any other museum? Right? Because they don't want to hear broadly about why you like museums in general or restaurants in general or whatever it is. They want to hear about this specific place. So the more details you can give, the better, right? The more specific you can make it with regards to what you're actually discussing, the better, right? Because oh, the food was it was delicious. Yes, you can say that, but if you stop there, then it's kind of like, well, you could say that about a lot of restaurants. I'm sure a lot of restaurants have delicious food. What is it about this restaurant that is good? Awesome. All right. The next one is describe a business that you think is successful, right? So, again, we want to include four different things. We want to include which business we are talking about that we think is successful. So, that's the obvious one. I'm sure everyone will include that. But we don't just want to stop there and say, oh, I think Amazon is a successful business. Boom, done. Well, no, not at all. Okay, what goods or services does this business provide to the public? What is the history of this business and how did it become successful? And also our opinion of the business or an experience that we had with the business. And this could be a positive experience or a negative one. If it's a successful business, it's likely going to be a positive opinion or experience. But if it is not, that's okay too, right? As long as you explain why that was your opinion or how that experience shaped your opinion with the business, then you're good to go. The business I'm talking about is McDonald's. This business serves fast food and drinks and things like that. So they serve items like burgers, French fries, poutine. They serve ice cream. They serve apple pie. Sometimes they also have seasonal items that they serve as well. And they also serve many other items too that I didn't mention, right? Just because we're talking about, and I want to pause here and just say, just because we're talking about a restaurant doesn't mean you have to memorize every single item on the menu, but do give some examples. Examples are good. So they give fast food like burgers, fries, and milkshakes. For example, that would be good. The history of the business. Well, this business actually used to be a hot dog stand a very long time ago. And then they slowly turned into the fast food chain that they are today. This business became successful because it's very inexpensive and convenient for people to get. People these days, especially people who live in a big city, they like things quick, easy, fast. Okay. So if they can go to a drive through window and get the McDonald's really easily and have a meal right there ready to go, that's a motivator for people, right? People can also just use their phones to order it really quickly and show their phone to the cashier and get their food right away. Also, very quick, right? So, McDonald's kept up with the technology that we use nowadays in our daily lives in order to continue to be a successful business, right? Because I'm sure they didn't do that back in the 1900s when cell phones and computers weren't very common. They probably didn't do that. That's not how people ordered their food. People would physically go into the restaurant and order their food, and you can still do that if you want to, but they're making it easier and easier and faster to just get your food, right? That's their main business model is to have their goods and services be nice and fast and easy and inexpensive so that they will get lots of business. An experience I've had with the business or my opinion. Well, I think that the business model is very good. It's very strong. They really think about what people actually want and they deliver it. They recognize people value things being fast and things being convenient and being inexpensive, and they deliver that, right? The food is not very healthy, is I think the main drawback to the business. However, many people aren't going to be too concerned with that, right? Not everyone is a health conscious person. So it's true that many health conscious people will choose not to eat McDonald's or not to eat it very often. However, health is not necessarily an important thing for everybody. And so the business is still successful because there are enough people who will still go there. They do also have some healthier choices in case somebody, does really want something quick and convenient and doesn't want it to be too many calories. They do have that option as well, but that's not where the majority of their sales come from necessarily, right? So that could be an example of my opinion of this business, right? However, you can put any business you want with whatever goods and service the business has, any opinion that you'd like, right? Maybe there's a business that is very successful that you don't think has good business practices, and that's totally fine. Maybe there's a business that's successful and you think they're successful because they do a lot of things really, really well, right? Could be any of those things. But the main key here is to make sure that when we're talking about this business or when we're talking about whatever it is that the topic is, to not stop too early. Make sure we talk more about the business or more about the topic and the purpose of it, talk about the history and the potential future of it if it's relevant, and also always, always, always talk about your opinion on it, right? Because with these questions, all too often I see people, for example, describe your favorite movie, who just say, oh, my favorite movie is this, and then maybe one more sentence about it, and then they're done, right? We don't want to do that. We want to go in a little bit more detail about why we enjoyed this movie. What's the movie about? What maybe happened after the movie, or anything else like that. Or here, when we want to describe one of our favorite places, someone might say, well, one of my favorite places is to go visit the lake by my cottage. Well, great, but let's talk more. Let's say more things than just that. Let's describe it in more detail than just that. Or for this one, describe a business you think is successful. Oh, well, I think Amazon is a successful business, or I think McDonald's is a successful business. Well, that's a fine place to start. Absolutely, right? Of course, we want to start with the topic, with by mentioning the topic and mentioning what we're actually talking about. Absolutely, we do. But the key is don't just stop there, right? Don't just stop there. We want to make sure we're talking about our opinion. We want to talk about the history and future if we know it. And we want to talk more about the topic, give some more background information about the topic that we know about, and also know certain vocabulary words. So knowing some basic words in business English like supply, demand, consumer, etc. is good, right? Just having a good vocabulary is important in general for this test, absolutely, so that you'll have the relevant words for whatever the topic is that you are asked to discuss. So that's important. I also want to talk about briefly. I know we talked about this in the last lecture, but I do want to say it again. What are they looking for? They're looking for good grammar, right? So that we're pausing in the right places, using proper grammar, very important. Also, they're looking for proper pronunciation. So, are we pronouncing the words accurately, right? That's important as well. Another one is, are we speaking fluently in English? Right. So, are we going to be, taking pauses where it doesn't make sense or taking too much time to think? And it's okay to take some time to think, but we also don't want to be speaking in very broken English. We want to be speaking in fluent English, ideally, right? And also to making sure that we're using full sentences as well as is of course very important. So making sure we have all those things. Oh, and then last but not least, vocabulary is important. So using good relevant vocabulary for the question that we are being asked, right? So if we're asked about why a business is successful, using words like supply or demand, or talking about what the consumer wants and how they're meeting those expectations, right? Those are some good things to say that are relevant to that, right? Or when talking about your favorite movie, you could talk about the cinema or film or anything, anything like that, using other words other than just what they've specifically said, right? What words they've specifically had is key here, right? So having good relevant vocabulary also really key here. All right, so good work today, everyone. I hope you found this informative. And also be sure to sign up with me a time where I can give you some example questions and also give you feedback on your responses and how you would rank in those different areas and how you can better improve your test score. So good work today, everyone. And I will see everyone for part 3. Okay, for part 3, we are going to be specifically discussing other questions that you might be asked, because section 3 is more about being asked questions on more specific questions about a certain topic and your opinion on it. So I will see everyone for part 3. Good work today, everyone, and goodbye.